Hello everybody, welcome to the security vibe check. Well, you'll find out not which malware, actually what supply chain incident you are. Malware just sounded cooler. Sorry we catfished you. It's been a bit of a long day, so we thought we'd bring something a little bit more fun and still a little bit educational. Hopefully everyone's not a super expert on supply chain incidents. But on our agenda today, we have only 3 things. There is the quiz, the results, and a rundown of some security supply chain incidents. Can I just ask, like, how many people are somewhat new to software security? Okay, that's good. We're not completely gonna be out of our depth here. So, us, we're part of the open source security team, which aims to make open source more secure. It's made up of a number of projects, and including OSV and DepsDev, which are the projects we're currently working on. So I'm Jess, this is Ellie, and as you can see is Old Cap and Napkins, who is the full-time deps.dev mascot, and he should be respected. So prepare for the quiz. If you can, get out some sort of notes app, or if you can tally in your head, or you have pen and paper, it's just going to be counting the amount of A's, B's, C's, and D's, and then you'll get designated at the end. So, is everyone ready? Cool. So first question. When a software update notification pops up, you A, read the full changelog. Rushing is for amateurs. B, check the old version's exploit notes. Patch notes are the treasure maps. C, update now. Support the devs. D, it's automated. My system handles it after tests are run.
That was slightly too quick. Has everyone had a chance to? Okay. When choosing a new online service, email, cloud storage, what is a key factor? A, data longevity and export options. B, how hackable the API is. C, what does TikTok suggest? Or D, security, certification, and integration.
Cool. How do you feel about browser extensions? A, they're a necessary evil. I use 2 and I've read their source code. B, it's fantastic. It's a modding API for the internet. C, love them. They make everything fun and personalized. Or D, a security risk. I use a few essential ones for productivity only.
When you're typing a website address quickly, you, A, I don't. I use a verified bookmark. B, fat finger it. Sometimes you find something interesting that way. C, mistype it all the time, thank goodness for search engines. Or D, use a keyboard launcher. Typing full URLs is inefficient.
When an app asks for a lot of permissions, you, A, uninstall it. An app should only request what is essential. B, deny all, then feed it fake data to see what it does. C, if my friends use it, it's probably fine. D, deny, it's an unacceptable systemic risk.
You receive an email with an invoice for something you don't remember buying. It looks fairly legit. You, A, forensically inspect the email headers in a sandbox. Never click. B, click the links in a VM. Let's see their phishing kit. C, panic a little, ask my friends if it looks real. Or D, ignore it like all my other emails.
Two-factor authentication is A, a baseline necessity. A hardware key is the only real option. B, a fun challenge to bypass. C, annoying but important. Everyone says to use it. D, a non-negotiable enforced security layer.
How often do you check for software updates on your lesser used devices or apps? A, on a strict biannual audit schedule. B, when I hear about a cool new exploit for one of them. C, yikes, whenever I happen to use Next. D, I don't, My network monitoring system alerts me.
All right, you're at a cafe. What's your stance on their free Wi-Fi? A, never. At most, a burner device on a hardened OS. B, connect and immediately start sniffing the traffic. C, awesome, I'll connect and post a selfie. D, I tether to my phone's VPN. Public Wi-Fi is insecure.
If you found a USB stick on the ground, you would A, take it to my lab for a full forensic analysis. B, plug it into my burner laptop, mystery box. C, take it to Lost and Found to find the owner. Or D, ignore it, the risk is not worth it.
If you were to infiltrate a group to get information, what method would you use? A, earn their trust over years by contributing perfect work. B, leave a USB stick or two lying on the ground. C, just be myself. People trust if you're genuine. D, I wouldn't target the people, I'd exploit the system they use.
How often would you audit your project dependencies? A, constantly. I review them as if they're my own code. B, when I'm bored or hear about a big new vulnerability. C, we run automated scans, but we trust our orders. Or D, the scanner runs on every commit, it's not a manual task.
How would you handle known vulnerabilities and dependencies? A, patch it myself, submit it upstream or fork the project. B, note the risk and move on, maybe exploit it to prove a point. C, vulnerabilities, meh, it'll probably be fine, it's not like my project's a target. D, high severity vulnerabilities block the next deployment, period.
How strict would your access controls be for a collaborative project environment? A, extremely. The principle of least privilege is paramount. B, as loose as possible. More access, more fun. C, the core team should all have admin. We trust each other. Or D, fully automated and role-based. No exceptions.
And then finally, how do you handle secrets and API keys? A, on a self-hosted vault, access requires my personal approval. B, on a sticky note as a joke, like Hunter 2. The real ones are hidden locally. C, a shared file the team can access, don't block anyone. D, I'd use environment variables or the secret management features of the VCS we use. All right, is everyone ready to count up their answers? We'll give you a couple of seconds to do so, and then we're going to go through each result, followed by a quick rundown of that attack. And if you have multiple, if you have like an equal amount, we'll discuss that later. I'll pick the one you think is most interesting. 17, I think. We could also be completely wrong with that. 15. Maybe we got rid of some we didn't like. Definitely got rid of some we didn't like. All right, we ready? Cool. If you picked mostly A's, you're the XZ utils attack. Your security approach is one of absolute control and meticulous preservation. You view your digital life as a priceless archive where every file, app, and connection must be personally vetted and cataloged. Security isn't just about preventing future problems. It's about achieving a state of perfect, unchanging stability. Your defenses are deep and built for a long siege. You trust your own audit above all else, and your guiding principle is that if a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing with extreme deliberation. Your greatest strength is your immunity to common rushed mistakes, but this same caution can make it difficult to adapt quickly. I will note that this is all a caricature. Don't take this to heart. So the XZ utils attack, XZ utils is not some obscure niche tool. It's a fundamental data compression library that's used across a lot of Linux systems. everything from servers, cloud infrastructure, and even a lot of our personal Linux machines rely on it. The targeted system that updated to the specific backdoored versions, 5.6.0 and 5.6.1, that's what it is targeted, sorry. And the goal was to achieve remote code execution to bypass authentication on these systems, essentially giving an attacker master key to millions of machines. What makes this even more interesting was how it was found, not by a dedicated security team, but by a vigilant Microsoft engineer, Andres Frund, who was simply trying to figure out why his SSH connections were acting strangely. And if we have a look at the timeline, it wasn't a single event, but a long-term operation that unfolded over several years. Originally, the account that was found to be malicious was this Giatan GitHub account, which tried to target the libarchive, but then they had too much support and maintainers that they were able to find that what they were trying to achieve was not going to work. And then Gia then made a commit to the XZ repo in February 2022, and over the course of a couple of months, manages to become a maintainer. But in that time, he, during the day, builds trust through innocuous commits, and during the night, sock puppetry with some burner accounts, essentially, to pressure the maintainer into giving more ownership. And then in February of 2024, this 5.6.0 was released, which contained the backdoor mechanism, and then 5.6.1 was released, containing the obfuscated code to be used. And then in March 2024, not what I meant to do. The Microsoft developer found that his SSH logins on his Debian testing box were unusually slow by about 500 milliseconds, and then debugged this performance issue using perf, and tracked it back to libelzimmer. Interesting is that the malicious code was not present in the main source code on GitHub. It was instead hidden inside two compressed binary test files that were included in the docket ignore, but included in the release tarballs, which made it nearly impossible to spot via a casual source code review. And the core of the attack was in this build process manipulation. The malicious script was a .m4 file that ran during the library's build process and decoded one of the test files into a bash script. The bash script then performed a more complicated decode process on another test file that decoded into another script, which extracted a shared object, which was added to the compilation process of libelzimmer, which could then be exploited. So the potential impact of this was kind of catastrophic. It earned itself a perfect CVSS score of 10.0. If successful, the backdoor would have allowed the attacker to achieve remote code execution on affected servers. At the time of this attack, it only affected some bleeding edge distributions and didn't really make its way into the more stable versions. They would have been able to bypass authentication checks entirely and giving them root access to millions of servers across governments, corporations, and infrastructure. The actual impact was just mostly a loss of trust in the open source model. There was also a frantic worldwide effort by distro maintainers, sysadmins, and developers to downgrade to a safe version of xzutils. And it also just highlighted the immense danger of maintainer burnout and the vulnerability of under-source but critical open source projects. There's kind of an awesome infographic here by Thomas. I can't pronounce his last name, but if anyone's interested in looking more into it and doesn't already know about it and understands what's going on here, highly recommend checking it out. And I would kind of go into how we could protect ourselves from this sort of attack, but it was very sophisticated. It was likely nation-state backed. I'm not sure what would have been done beyond staying vigilant, staying curious, and supporting open source maintainers. But when it is discovered, having a security scanner is always a good step.
All right, if you picked mostly Bs, you are a BoldDB typo squad. You don't just have a security vibe, you are a security vibe. Your approach is to test every system, policy, and social interaction as a puzzle to be solved or a rule to be bent. For you, security is an accelerating game of offense, not a boring chore of defense. You're constantly probing for weaknesses, not to cause harm, but for the thrill of the exploit and the satisfaction of proving you're smarter than the system. Your unique strength is your innate ability to find a flaw nobody else sees. Your challenge is learning to respect the rules you haven't personally broken yet. All right, so BoldDB is a popular Go package module for databases, and it's used by thousands of organizations. So let's look at the BoldDB typo squad supply chain attack, which was discovered earlier this year. But first, what is a typo squad? As the name suggests, the key factor here is the similarity between a legitimate package and the malicious one, trying to imitate it. The attack can be achieved by making a small typo, leading to using a package that otherwise would be obviously detected as malicious, or in the case of BoldDB, a very sophisticated malicious copy of the real package, which could fool developers even during manual inspection. So the timeline of the BoldDB package is rather small because the malicious package was just first published in November 2021 in GitHub. But because it resembled the real BoldDB so much, it wasn't until early this year that the malicious package was discovered by socket security researchers. We don't really know how BoldDB impacted other packages because we don't know who downloaded or used the package. So we can just go into how the attack worked and why it wasn't detected for over 3 years. First, the malicious version was published on GitHub, and then the Go module proxy cached it. Then the git tag was modified to point to a clean version, imitating the real BoldDB really well. So GitHub would continue showing the clean version to anyone inspecting the malicious repository. Meanwhile, the Go module proxy would continue serving the cached backdoored version. So if you were to install the package via the Go CLI, you would get the malicious version containing a hidden backdoor, which gives an attacker full remote access to the compromised system. How can we protect ourselves? The first thing to do so is to double-check the packages we're using. But names are not the only thing that we could mistype, so make sure you're also installing the package from the right ecosystem, because pip install versus npm install can also turn out to be problematic. Unfortunately, as we've learned from BoldDB, manual inspection is not enough to point that the package is safe. That is why automated tools for managing dependencies and for finding security vulnerabilities and for patching them is also a must. If you picked mostly Cs, you're the Heartbleed exploit. Your security model is built on people. You believe the strongest defense is a connected, collaborative community where everyone looks for each other. Your vibe is all about social contracts, using apps your friends recommended, taking advice from the community and assuming good intent from the others. You're the first to share a helpful tip and the first to support a friend in need. That makes you a vital asset and a trusted hub in any group, creating a resilient and supportive network. Your primary challenge is guarding against threats that exploit this inherent trust. So as most of you probably know, Heartbleed was a severe vulnerability in OpenSSL discovered in 2014, which was heavily publicized due to its widespread. In case you don't know what OpenSSL is, it is a popular implementation of the transport layer security protocol, and is essentially a cryptographic library that secures internet communication. It is used by open source web servers, email chat servers, VPNs, Linux-based systems, and so on. That's why at the time of the attack, there were hundreds of millions of devices using this library that were vulnerable to Heartbleed. Note that this was not actually a targeted attack. The vulnerability was due to a lack of input validation, which allowed attackers to read the memory of systems that were using the vulnerable version of the library. The name of the vulnerability comes from the TLS heartbeat extension, where the bug originated from. So let's look at the timeline of heartbeat. The bug was first introduced into OpenSSL on December 31st, 2011. This was not done maliciously. It was an accidental error not caught during the code reviews. The vulnerability was, however, first discovered by new Meta from the Google security team and reported to OpenSSL on April 1st, as an April joke, I guess, in 2014. Independently of Google, and almost at the same time, a Finnish security company called Conomicon also discovered and reported the vulnerability. The company came up with the name and with the logo for the vulnerability, so likely the popularity of the vulnerability is because of that. It is a pretty cool logo. And so on April 7th, OpenSSL finally announced the vulnerability and released a patched version for it. From then onwards, news about the vulnerability spread rapidly, and there was a massive remediation effort that also started from it. But by a month later, only 43% of the affected websites had reissued their security certificates, and 1.5 of the 800,000 most popular TLS-enabled websites were still vulnerable to the bug. 2 months later, there were 300,000 public web servers still remaining vulnerable. And then, according to Shodan reports, 5 years later, there were still 140,000 devices still vulnerable to Heartbleed. And last year, which is a decade later, there are still over 30,000 devices just in the US that are still vulnerable to Heartbleed. So we've seen the timeline, but how does the Heartbleed exploit actually works? It's a buffer overread vulnerability, meaning more data is read than it should. And as we mentioned, the bug originated from the Heartbleed extension of the TLS implementation in OpenSSL. The extension checks whether the connection between two devices is still alive by periodically sending small messages between the devices. One device sends a message and its length, and the other is supposed to return the exact same message to show the connection is still active. However, the code did not validate the inputs correctly, and it allowed for a mismatch between the length of the message and the specified length. So in practice, this means, as you can see from the comic, that if a device sends a request with, let's say, potato 6, if you can see that, the expected return message is also potato. If we have bird 4, also the return message will be bird. But if we send a request for hot and 500, the other device will not only return hot, but also whatever data was saved on the device at this point. So this data, unfortunately, could include private keys, usernames, passwords, credit card information, or any other information saved on the device. And so if an attacker stole private keys, they could not only impersonate the victim, they could also alter existing data and decrypt any data that was captured prior. So all in all, the attack was rather easy to perform. It did not require any skills and also left no trace. So because the exploit left no trace, it's hard to tell whether and how much a system was actually compromised. And this makes it difficult to estimate the exact impact the vulnerability had. What we know is that the vulnerability was undetected for over 2 years, and it was easy to exploit. So that and the widespread use of OpenSSL led to a massive remediation effort, not only from OpenSSL, but also other businesses and organizations. The overall estimated cost was over 500 million. And it required a lot of human effort, as systems had to be patched, SSL certificates reissued, and users were forced to change their passwords, and so on. So how can we protect ourselves against similar supply chain exploits? It's difficult to prevent this from happening. However, once a vulnerability is discovered and a patch is available, it's vital to act quickly and to prevent further damage and not to still have vulnerable devices 10 years later. Once again, using automated tools for managing dependencies, for detecting security vulnerabilities, and for applying patches can improve your security posture. Or you can follow some of the pro tips when Heartbleed was first announced and stay away from the internet entirely.
And then finally, if you picked mostly Ds, you are the TJ Actions attack. You see security as a massive engineering problem that can be solved with elegant, efficient automation. Your vibe is that of an all-seeing system where human error is the primary bug to be eliminated. Security is achieved through ruthlessly efficient processes, automatic protocols, and constant monitoring that flags any deviation from the norm. You believe in taking the fallible human element out of the equation wherever possible, and your approach is incredibly robust and scalable, but its rigidity can leave little room for nuance, and its greatest risk lies in a flaw within the central systems you trust implicitly. So what is TJ Actions? TJ Actions is a handy GitHub action that many of us might actually have used. It automates the process of identifying what files have been altered in a commit or pull request, which is incredibly useful for running conditional workflows in our CI/CD pipelines. In this case, the attackers were targeting a specific company, but instead of going for them directly, they went through their supply chain and essentially tried to poison the well, so to speak. The aim was to steal sensitive data, API keys, access tokens, you name it. There's probably more to what they were trying to do, but this is as far as they got. And from any project, they used this action. Yeah, so early signs pointed to a focused attack on the crypto exchange Coinbase. And the very nature of the attack meant that its potential blast radius was kind of enormous. So this timeline for this is kind of interesting. I don't think the timeline is the easiest way to display it, but essentially there's the personal access token that was leaked. There's a bunch of malicious stuff that happens in the middle, and then Step Security finds it, and GitHub temporarily takes it down. But this diagram from Palo Alto Networks does a much better job of describing it. You can see that there was a malicious pull request that was done to spot bugs, which led to leaking a maintainer's personal access token to get repository access to another one, which led to overriding a v1 tag and review dog action setup, which was a dependency of TJ Actions, ESLint change files, which is used in the workflow of TJ Actions change file, where they were able to first override the v39 tag and then try to override a bunch more tags after that. I think it was almost all of the tags were pointed at a malicious commit instead, which is used in the workflow of the Coinbase agent kit, but also in a lot of other systems. And how the specific payload kind of worked is that it would download this memory dump from a Python script that was just on GitHub, which has since been taken down, and I don't think any reports have found what actually was in it. But then it will execute the script while gripping for secrets, double encode the secrets using base 64, and then the very interesting part was that the primary method of exfiltration was just printing the stolen secrets to the build logs, which meant that for public repositories, secrets were exposed to the world, and for private repositories, while not publicly visible, the secrets were still compromised and accessible to anyone with the build logs. And then for the impact of this, there was tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of projects that were at risk here. This diagram is from the center of review dog rather than TJ Actions, as researchers kind of shifted the point a little bit. But yeah, as you could see, there was a long chain. And yeah, beyond the immediate scramble to rotate keys, there was just a kind of a hit to our trusting of these tools. But what can be done about this sort of thing in the future? Firstly, pinning your dependencies to a specific commit hash instead of a tag is one of the best ways to ensure that the exact code you've audited is not the maliciously updated version. Obviously, embracing the principle of least privilege, only providing your CI/CD workflows with the permissions they absolutely need, and also being diligent in auditing dependencies, monitoring build logs, and then finally implementing automated security scanning to catch these issues before they become a full-blown crisis.
So that's the end of our quiz. Hope you like the incident that you got.
And if you were somewhere in the middle, congrats, you're a log4j and you get to research that yourself, but essentially you're running Doom on Minecraft.
So if you want to learn more about what we do, or if you are interested in vulnerability management or remediation tools, check out osv.dev or OSV Scanner. And if you're after dependency management tools, check out devs.dev.